Hi, welcome to the quiz. You can answer along on quizalto.com, all for free. The exact URL of this quiz will be in the notes down below. Let's get started, good luck. What are the primary use cases for the AWS IoT button? Web hosting, database management, and blockchain. Graphic design, 3D modeling, and video editing. Prototyping, home automation, and notification services. Video conferencing, data analysis, and gaming. The AWS IoT button is primarily used for prototyping IoT solutions, home automation, and sending notifications. What mobile platforms support the AWS IoT button app? BlackBerry OS, iOS and Android. Symbian OS. Windows Phone. The AWS IoT Button app is available for iOS and Android platforms. How does AWS IoT Button differ from traditional IoT devices? It functions without a cloud connection. It has built-in AI capabilities. It is designed for simple prototyping. It is a wearable device. The AWS IoT button is designed for simple prototyping, unlike more complex IoT devices. What should be done to ensure AWS IoT button's connectivity in a new location? Replace the button battery. Reset the button hardware. Update the Wi-Fi credentials. Install additional drivers. Updating the Wi-Fi credentials ensures the AWS IoT button can connect to the internet in a new location. What must be done to reuse an AWS IoT button with a new application? Reconfigure the button. Reset the button's hardware. Contact AWS support. Replace the battery. To reuse the AWS IoT button with a new application, you must reconfigure it to trigger the new application's Lambda function or other event. What is a common application of the AWS IoT button in customer service? Monitoring server health. Ordering new stock. Triggering customer support calls. Scheduling social media posts. The AWS IoT button can be used to trigger customer support calls or actions when pressed. How is the battery life of the AWS IoT button generally described? Unlimited. About 1,000 clicks. About 100 clicks. About 5,000 clicks. The AWS IoT button is designed to last for about 1,000 clicks. How does the AWS IoT button communicate with AWS IoT Core? Over a secure internet connection. Via local network. Through direct cable connection. Using Bluetooth. The AWS IoT button communicates with AWS IoT Core over a secure internet connection. What kind of configuration is needed for AWS IoT button to trigger an action? EC2 instance setup. CloudFront distribution setup. Lambda function configuration. S3 bucket policy. To trigger an action with the AWS IoT button, a Lambda function needs to be configured. What type of authentication is required for AWS IoT Button's first-time setup? IAM role, access key and secret key. AWS IoT Button certificate, SSH key. The AWS IoT Button uses a certificate for authentication during the first-time setup. How many different types of clicks can the AWS IoT Button detect? 3, 1, 5, 4. The AWS IoT Button can detect single, double, and long clicks. What is the AWS IoT Button primarily used for? Gaming, prototyping IoT applications, streaming music, emailing. The AWS IoT Button is designed for developers to prototype IoT applications quickly and easily. What kind of network security does the AWS IoT Button support? WPA2, WEP, Open Network Only, WPA. The AWS IoT Button supports WPA2 for network security. Which AWS service can automatically respond to AWS IoT Button events? AWS CloudFormation, AWS Lambda, AWS Code Pipeline, Amazon RDS. AWS Lambda can automatically respond to AWS IoT Button events by running specific functions. What must be done after pressing the AWS IoT Button for the first time? Register the button with AWS support. Update the button firmware. Replace the button battery. Configure the button via the AWS IoT Button Dev app. After pressing the AWS IoT Button for the first time, you need to configure it via the AWS IoT Button Dev app. What event does pressing the AWS IoT Button trigger? A Redshift query, a CloudFormation stack, a Lambda function, an EC2 instance. Pressing the button triggers a Lambda function that can execute custom code. Which AWS service can you use to notify users of AWS IoT Button events? Amazon RDS, AWS Glue, Amazon SNS, Amazon Athena. Amazon SNS can notify users via SMS or email when the AWS IoT Button is pressed. How does the AWS IoT Button send data to the AWS cloud? Through secure MQTT messages. Through FTP transfers. Through unencrypted HTTP requests. Through WebSocket connections. The AWS IoT Button sends data to the AWS cloud through secure MQTT messages. What is the AWS IoT Button Dev app used for? Configuring the AWS IoT Button. Developing new firmware for the button. Managing AWS IoT core policies. Creating new AWS accounts. The AWS IoT Button Dev app is used for configuring the AWS IoT Button. Which SDK can be used to program AWS IoT Button actions? AWS SDK for JavaScript. AWS SDK for Swift. AWS SDK for Ruby. AWS SDK for PHP. The AWS SDK for JavaScript can be used to program AWS IoT Button actions. What AWS service provides real-time analytics for data from the AWS IoT Button? AWS WAF. Amazon Kinesis. AWS Glue. Amazon S3. Amazon Kinesis provides real-time analytics for data from the AWS IoT Button. What is required to initially configure the AWS IoT Button? USB connection. Wi-Fi credentials. Bluetooth pairing. SIM card. The AWS IoT Button needs Wi-Fi credentials for initial configuration to connect to the Internet. What is the primary method to programmatically handle AWS IoT Button events? Amazon Aurora. AWS Lambda. Amazon RDS. Amazon EC2. AWS Lambda is the primary service for handling events triggered by the AWS IoT Button. What is required to integrate AWS IoT Button with a third-party service? RDS instance. EC2 instance. S3 bucket. API gateway. API gateway can be used to integrate the AWS IoT Button with third-party services. Which feature allows AWS IoT Button to send messages directly to a user? Integration with Amazon RDS. Integration with Amazon S3. Integration with AWS Code Deploy. Integration with Amazon SNS. Amazon SNS can be used to send messages, such as SMS or email, directly to users when the button is pressed. And that's a wrap. Thanks to everyone who participated. Remember, you can answer along on quizalto.com, where you can keep track of your progress and find much more quizzes. We hope you had a fun and challenging time. Until next time. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel for more. Hit the bell icon to be notified as soon as we upload. Please leave a comment if you have any thoughts or suggestions, and, if you think this video is worth sharing with someone who could benefit from it, please forward a link to them. See you next time. Thanks for watching.